Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some homemade naan, and then I'm going to make I don't know what to kind of call it, but I'm going to make a pressed together lamb and pork in on a sheet pan and bake it up, and then it will be kind of like hero meat. So like a homemade hero meat, but it's not because hero's grilled, but it's something along the way there. And then we're going to saute up some vegetables. I'm going to make a cucumber and tomato salad and some homemade tzatziki sauce to put on our whole little naan wedge thing. So let's start by getting our homemade naan going. And I'm making a big batch of this naan so I can have really big pockets for this. So I've got 2 cups of sourdough discard. It's a lot of discard. I had to feed up my sourdough. I've got a couple loaves prepping so I can bake up some sourdough tomorrow. But 2 cups of our sourdough discard. And then we need 3/4 of a cup of water. And we're going to do a cup of yogurt, or you can use sour cream. Both work well with this. Just don't use Greek yogurt. You need kind of a slightly smoother yogurt. Greek yogurt's been strained a bit too much, so it doesn't give you quite the liquid that you need in it. And of course, use plain. Don't use a flavored. So we need a cup of yogurt. And I'm just going to overfill it. That way I don't have to scrape it out too well. There. And we're going to make, the reason we're making our naan base right now is we want to let it sit and hydrate so that it will be nice and elastic and have this great texture to it. I'm going to grab my olive oil that's over here because we're going to put in about a 1/2 cup of olive oil. Because we cook this up on a dry skillet. So you need to put a little bit of fat in it now so it doesn't burn or get too crunchy. Okay, let me get these guys out of the way. And we're going to give this a good mix together, and then we're going to add in baking powder and baking soda, but I do want to start kind of incorporating it in here. And so just kind of mix it until that's the discard, the water, and this yogurt is all kind of fairly mixed together. The oil will pretty much sit on top until we get the flour in here, but you can give it a good kind of whip up. Okay, that should be about fairly good. And then we're going to do our salt, our baking soda, and baking powder. We need a whole tablespoon of salt. So I'll put 3 teaspoons is the same as a tablespoon. So 1, 2, 3. And you could use garlic salt if you wanted a little touch of garlic with it as well. We've got our baking soda. So we're going to do a teaspoon of baking soda. And then 4 teaspoons of baking powder. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, when you start mixing this in, you're going to get, it's going to make the kind of the yogurt and discard base really fluffy because it's going to kind of interact with it just like a baking soda and vinegar experiment. But that's what really makes this naan so fluffy, but also moist and tender. But you can see it's already kind of growing in size in there. So it's kind of fun. It's your little science lesson for the day. There we go. And now we're going to mix in our flour. And then we'll kind of whip it out and do a little bit of a knead, and then we'll let it kind of sit and hydrate. So we're going to put in 6 cups of flour. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm making a big batch today because my kids always say that they wish they had more, even though they eat a whole naan. They're always like, we want more and more, because it is so good. This is one of those things that just homemade naan is so much better than store-bought. It's so tender and delicious. So we're going to mix it up. I'm using my dough whisk here to kind of incorporate it, and then we'll turn it out on our counter and give it a good knead. And then we just let it kind of soak up the liquid in the flour, and it's called letting the flour hydrate. And then after about 10 minutes, we can start rolling it out and making our first, cooking up our first sets of naan. Yeah. And I start with my dough whisk, and then we end with our hands. And your dough should be, it's going to have a little bit of a tack to it, but it shouldn't be so much that you can't work with it where it sticks all over you. So once we get it kneading, if it's too sticky, just add in a pinch or so more flour. But it shouldn't be too sticky. And this is going to make some good naan. I'm making really big ones. So I'll have a couple really big ones, but you can make about, 12 smaller ones with it, like, medium size ones. I'm trying to go with 8 really big ones. It's got a little bit of tack, so I'm going to add again a little bit of flour because sometimes you get a little pocket when you're measuring it out. Just kind of dusting it around so that it doesn't stick to my hands too much. We'll give this a good knead, and then we'll let it sit and hydrate. And that's going to, like when you first work with dough, as you see how when you pull it, it breaks apart and it gets pretty rough. Once that flour has hydrated, it's going to be very smooth when you work with it. So in the beginning, it's rough because it hasn't absorbed a lot of water. It doesn't have a lot of good elasticity.
Would you say it's a viscous dough?
Funny, funny, funny. He's such a comedian, guys. I think we're going to have salmon. I should just, I know you can order the salmon from Alaska, shipped in. Should just have that shipped in so we can have salmon every single day. One thing that I didn't know, but when we were on our cruise to Alaska, I had no idea that they had white salmon. And it actually is pretty good. It tastes pretty much just like the same one. I don't know if I'd spend the extra money for the white salmon because it tastes pretty much the same, but it was pretty cool. Okay, we've got it nice and kneaded up here. We're going to let it hydrate. And while it's hydrating, we're going to work on our meat base and then our veggies. Get my hands cleaned up here. And let's see. I'm going to start before we do our meat base, I'm going to start sauteing up my onion here because caramelizing onions always takes a hot minute. So I want them to get going, and then we're going to mix together our meat because we're going to be pressing it out fairly thin. So it's not going to take very long in the oven to cook. So I've got one yellow onion, and since this is going to be kind of stuffed inside, our naan will kind of fold it up kind of like a taco. I'm going to do nice, long, skinny, stringy onions. And we're going to use a lot of onions, so a whole onion because sauteed onions are just so delicious. We're going to add a little bit of olive oil to my skillet here. And while this is hydrating, I'm actually going to turn on this skillet over medium heat and let it start to heat up because that is the one thing that will slow you down when making naan is heating up your skillet. It takes forever to get it nice and hot to where it cooks off nicely. We're going to put in about, 2 teaspoons of olive oil here. I'm going to break it up. Kind of add part in there. And then we can work on our meat base for this. So we're gonna make a panade using our bread, eggs, and some cream. Just gonna get everything set up. So I've got 2 slices of bread here, and we're gonna soak them in a little bit of cream, enough to make a paste out of it, but you don't want them drenched in it. And I just like doing this instead of breadcrumbs because I find breadcrumbs just makes it a little bit too dry. So this will give you a more tender, moist meat to work with for it. I just find, just makes it a little nicer. And I do this with meatballs, meatloaf, anything where that kind of uses breadcrumbs as a binder. I use this in place. So our bread is nice and soaked up. We're going to add in 2 eggs. So I've got 1 and 2. I'm going to give my hands a quick rinse so we can get the spices in real quick. And then we'll mix everything kind of together. So we're going to add in about around a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of onion powder. This is going to give a really great savory flavor to our meat. And a good amount because this will add such great flavor. And we're going to add in about a teaspoon of black pepper. And then I have some seasoning called Greek Freak, which has a whole bunch of different spices in it. It looks like, orange peel, tomatoes, crushed red pepper, lots of unknown things. It looks like there's oregano in here, and basil, some good stuff. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of this. It has a great flavor. It gives you kind of that Greek flavor in it. I bought it at Costco the other day. It's really good. And then we're going to put in some garlic salt. We want about 2 teaspoons. I always like to do about a teaspoon of garlic salt per meat. And then some green onions here. And cut off the kind of bottom parts, and then we'll kind of pop it in here. This will give you a little bit of a fresh onion kick to it. So we'll have the onion powder with the green onions, just a little freshness to it. And then before I go in and mix these, I'm going to grab some tongs and kind of toss my onions because I can see that the oil is nice and hot now. Give them a good little shake. I'm going to turn it down now to about a 5 now that it's warmed up. And we'll give these a good toss. And just break any pieces of onions that are still stuck together apart. That way they will let out all their flavor and be less astringent. There we go. Okay. Whew. Getting a little onion to it. Before I get my onions or my thing mixed up, I'm going to cut my meat. That way it's, or my package is open. I am using 1 part lamb and 1 part ground pork. So ground lamb and ground pork. You could do all lamb. You could also do lamb and beef with this. You could do lamb and chicken. You could also just do beef or just pork or just chicken. Really, you could do a lot of different things. They all kind of work well with these spices and these flavors. So I'm just going to have them right there ready because this part's a little bit messy. So I'm going to go in here with my hands with the spices and the egg and the bread. And we're just going to kind of squeeze it together until we have a nice kind of base form. And this is going to be the binder that kind of holds ours together, because if you ever cook up ground meat, it will just kind of crumble apart in here. So this is what's going to really keep it binded. Here. And then we can start adding in our ground meat. Let's tilt that one. So.
And can you go over the spices for the panade?
Yes. So we added in about 1.5 tablespoons of onion powder, 2 teaspoons of garlic salt, about 1 tablespoon of Greek freak, and a teaspoon of black pepper. And we diced up some green onions as well. So some good base seasonings. And then, of course, you know, you made your panade with egg, cream, and bread. So we're going to squeeze this mixture in here. And we're just going to work it through until it's all completely incorporated. And I find the best way to do this is just to squeeze it through your fingers, because it really allows the meat to mix together and break up, and those spices to season it thoroughly. And mixing your spices into your panade base really makes sure that it gets evenly spread throughout your meat base, which is important because you want seasoned meat. Okay. So looking pretty fine. And you'll know once it's mixed up is it will all kind of have one kind of solid color to it, especially if you're using 2 different types of meats. They typically have 2 different colors. So once they've mixed together, it should all look very similar. Okay. Now, the fun part. We're going to take our meat and we're going to kind of lay it out flat on our baking sheet. That way it will cook kind of like, it'll be nice and thin, almost like a hero meat. But you know, hero meat is grilled and then you kind of cut it off a skewer.
You have a question? Is the garlic salt the only salt you will be adding to the meat?
Yes. So, and there's 2 teaspoons of it. I find that 1 teaspoon of garlic salt does enough to flavor up the meat in like the salt portion. Now, you can always add more or less per whatever you like, you know what I mean? I've always been told that I like my stuff more salted than a lot of people. So over the years, I have worked hard to like cut back on it, but I love really salty stuff. So we're going to, again, spread it out nice and thin like this, so that it will bake up. Again, when it cooks, it will get a little bit smaller and a little bit thinner. And we'll kind of actually season. Think about when you grill hamburgers or cook hamburgers, how they shrink in. You'll get a little shrinkage like this as well. But just try to keep it all kind of held together, but just stretch it out. So it's almost like a sheet pan meatloaf. There we go. Kind of trying to figure out a word to describe this. Here. And it spreads out pretty far if you see that. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna give my hands a good wash now. Okay. You always need a good scrub after working with this. And then the next part that we're going to do before we kind of pop it in the oven to cook up here is you want to kind of make little sections, but they don't want to need to be complete indents. But that way, when you go to like break it apart, it's going to be a lot easier. Give this a little bit of a toss first. So I'm just going to use, this is actually just a dough cutter. So I'm just going to use this and kind of make my little indents in the meat. But it doesn't, you don't need to push all the way through. This is just going to allow you to have a natural break point when you're taking it off. So, and this is our, again, our ground lamb and pork mixed together. And we're going to be serving this on our homemade naan. But it's got a nice kind of Greek seasoning to it. Here we go. So we'll have our little, almost little meat things. I've got to coin a term for this, but it'll be delicious. I'm going to pop this in my oven. I do have it on the air fryer setting at 425. So I'm going to pop this in here, and this will probably only need about 10 minutes to cook. So we'll get that going. I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes, and then we'll check at it, see if it needs a little bit more or not. But it's going to cook up fairly quickly for it.
But basically, like your own hero slices.
Yes, they're going to be essentially like a hero slices. You know, they're just done a little bit differently. You know, hero is grilled meat that's on a skewer that you shave off. So it's in the same concept of it, but a little different.
Stephanie said sheep meat.
You know what? I like it. Hero sheep meat. Okay, I'm going to start working on one of my naan things so we can kind of get it rolling out. So I'm going to take my dough here, but you can see it's already so much more smooth and elasticy than it was before.
Oh, CJ's got a good bougier sounding one. Deconstructed hero.
Ooh, see? Maybe we'll have to have a poll and see who that's going to be the winner of my creation. It's just going to be good. That's all that matters to me, is if it tastes good. You know, I feel like that's why I always say I don't think it could ever be on like a cooking show, because I don't care enough about my presentation to be there, because I just care about something that tastes good, and it doesn't have to be super bougie. It just has to be delicious. Okay, we're going to shape this into a ball. And that way it will be somewhat like a circle when you roll it out. But as you know, mine never turn out in a circle.
And can you go over how you made the naan dough?
Yes. So this is, we use 2 cups of sourdough discard, a cup of yogurt, 3/4 of a cup of water, 1/2 a cup of oil. Mixed all of that together. Then we added in a teaspoon of baking soda, 4 teaspoons of baking powder, and a tablespoon of salt. Mix all that together, and then we have 6 cups of flour in here. We kneaded it until it kind of came together in a cohesive dough, and then you just let it sit for about 10-15 minutes for this. I do believe I have this as a recipe card. I think I might give this recipe card out to everybody in the spring, so you might have to go do some digging for it. We're going to put it on our skillet here that's warmed up. I've got it over 4, and we're going to kind of toast it up. Let me give it a little bit of a roll on here, because it went back in. I always say, I'm like, I want a nice big one here, but there we go. Cooking up nicely there. While that's cooking up, let's get our peppers going in here, then our zucchini, just kind of doing some Mediterranean kind of themed veggies to go inside our little hero sheet meat non-veg deconstructedness. So many choices. Oh, I've never eaten. That's kind of pretty. We're going to take out our little, and then we're just going to slice them up. Again, I'm going to do them long and skinny, just like with our onions, so that they get kind of, they just go in the nicely in our little sandwich. So I'm using a bell pepper. You could use, I like red, yellow, orange, or sweet peppers. You can definitely use green, but I prefer the other ones because they're a little less bitter.
Do you ever do an inclusion in your naan dough, like mozzarella cheese?
You know, I have done like, roasted garlic in there, and I've always thought about doing cheese, but one of my kids is not a big fan of cheese inside their dough, so I never mess with it because this naan is everybody's favorite. I always have like little hummus packets. You know how Costco sells those little hummus tubs? I always have those because they love just to eat this naan if there's leftover with hummus, just plain. I do rub butter on it, but I know you can put like parsley in there and so many other things. I know I said one of these days I might do a roasted garlic one or a sauteed garlic, because I'd saute it up. Got my peppers in here. Man overboard. I'll put it right there. And then let me check. Again, you always want to make sure you heat your skillet up nice and hot in the beginning. Pretty nice. You got it cooking up nicely. I always say the bottom side when you first put it on is the crinkly one. The second side is going to give you that really smooth, pretty kind of tortilla look to it. And then I'm going to get my zucchini prepped up, although I'm not sure if I'm going to use both. But for our zucchini, we're going to have this go in there with the peppers and the onions. I think I'm just going to slice it down in half and do little half circles. I thought about doing long stringy bits of it, but when you don't have the skin on your zucchini, it tends to kind of get mushy and dissolve apart. So I don't want it to kind of get mushy. So we're going to leave a little bit of skin intact on each one. And we'll put them in here. And I will say, one zucchini yields a lot of veggie. It stretches pretty far. Maybe I'll use the other one to make zucchini muffins. That's one of my kids' favorite. And it's funny because I feel like I'm winning because they're eating a vegetable without like argument, but it's like you don't even know you're eating a vegetable. It's just delicious. Okay, I'll get these guys in. Now you could always use yellow squash in place of this as well. The only thing with yellow squash is it's not quite as firm in the middle, so you might have to scrape out a little bit of that initial seeding to get a better kind of less soggy quality on it. And before we pop our zucchini in, I'm going to mince up a little bit of garlic. Because everybody needs some garlic. And then we're going to work on a little tomato, cucumber, and kind of red onion salad. And a little bit of a homemade tzatziki sauce. So you get kind of all of that. I find that when I eat hero meat or lamb like that, I either make two sauces. I either make a garlic aioli, which is a bit more savory, or the really refreshing tzatziki sauce, which is like the yogurt, lemon, cucumber, and dill base to it. So I'm going to do the tzatziki today because it's a little bit more refreshing. And we had a kind of a rich lunch today. We made a bacon, chicken, mac and cheese with some truffle oil. So I'm doing a little lighter, little refreshing fare for dinner. I like to try to balance it out. Okay, let's toss that garlic in there and let it saute up just a little bit before we add that zucchini in. There we go. Let's see. Beautiful. See how I told you the bottom side always looks picture perfect. Before, I'm going to shape this guy out and we'll put it on there, and then we're going to butter them up. Always butter up your naan when you take it off because it prevents the outer skin of it, I guess, from drying out. Keeps it flexible so that you can use it as a sandwich.
How was the bacon Gouda mac and cheese I want?
Oh, it was so delicious. Just like scrumptious. It just hit you, you know? I feel like a couple years ago was like the bougie mac and cheese where everybody was doing something crazy with it. And it just kind of hit. It was just nice. And I love Gouda. And so it's like one of my, like a nice form of it. And the truffle oil is so good. It reminds me of, there's this like restaurant here in Nashville called like North Italia. And they make this truffle cheese bread there. And it had all those flavors in it for it. So I'm going to give this a little stretch out. We'll get this guy going. And let me grab some room temperature butter. And you're just going to rub a little bit over the top like this. We'll get some on the bottom as well. And it just helps keep it from getting dried out and crunchy for it. But there we go. Okay, let's work on our next part. Let's give these a little toss. You can smell that garlic cooking up there.
And a question, what material is your rolling pin?
It's made from plastic. It's a fondant roller, which actually I love for like tortillas or naan. Something that I don't need a lot of press behind when you have an elasticy dough, and it's really like you can use it with one hand. When I need to do more heavy duty rolling, I have a marble rolling pin that I absolutely love. But for just this kind of little simple thing, I like it because The plastic makes it non-stick in there. I do have it in my Amazon shop because I love it. And I originally bought it for when I made cakes and I did fondant and everything like that. But now it's mainly used for naan and tortillas and all that jazz. Let's go check out our meat, see if it's nice and ready. If it is, I'll just turn off the oven and let it sit in there nice and warm until we're ready to pop it out. Ooh, looking pretty darn good. I'm just gonna give it a quick little kind of a touch here to make sure it's firm all the way through. Perfect, delicious. So I'm gonna keep it there so it's nice and warm because we'll be ready in about 5 or so, 10 minutes, and I'll take it out in like 5. But oven, let me turn it off. I thought I turned it off. Turn off the oven, let it sit in there until you're ready to serve it. Both pork and lamb have a lot of like natural fat in it, so it will keep it nice and juicy. And I didn't cook it for very long so that it will be tender and have just this lovely flavor. Okay, let me turn this guy up just a smidge. And we will season up our veggies here towards the end, but I don't like to do them until the end so that they don't get kind of caked on the bottom of my pan. Let me grab a little bowl here for our cucumber and tomato salad, and we're gonna get one for our tzatziki sauce. So my 10-year-old daughter, this is one of her favorite salads because she just loves tomatoes and the little bit of hint of vinegar and lemon in it. She just loves it. So I'm just going to cut out the little kind of, where the stem grows on the tomato. Just take that out so then I can slice these up kind of nicely. And we're just going to do wedges. And you could also do this with like cherry tomatoes and whatnot. I just had some vine ripe tomatoes. There we go. Let me check my naan over here before we cut the next one. Beautiful. So you can see how thick it puffs up. That's what also makes it so lovely. But it is a really tender kind of dough in there. Like bread, it's cooked all the way through it, but it's light and fluffy. And it's just, I always say, it's just a lovely, really tender kind of bread that is great, for a sandwich or whatnot. Okay, we've got our tomatoes in here. Give these a nice little toss. All right. Break some of those zucchinis apart. And then I'm going to use 2 cucumbers in our salad, and then we'll save 1 cucumber. We'll go for our tzatziki sauce. Now, these are baby cucumbers, so you don't have to peel them. But if you were using, the regular or like full-size cucumber, like a Bonnie cucumber, you want to give that skin a peel because it gets pretty tough. English cucumbers have a tender skin, so you don't have to peel them, or baby cucumbers. So they're just a little bit nicer, where you can still kind of eat the skin on them. Throw these guys in here. And then I've got a little bit of red onion that we will add in as well, just for a nice little sharpness to it. I'm going to cut them fairly thin so that you don't get too strong of an onion flavor, but it's there. There we go. Sprinkle those in. Beautiful. And now let's just make a quick little dressing for it. Let me grab a little bit of vinegar over here. Here, right in front of my eyes. Let me give this a quick toss. I'll turn it down just a smidge. Looking like it's toasting up nicely. We'll add some spices here in just a second. I'm going to turn it down nice and low because they're just about done. Okay, let's grab a little teeny tiny bowl here just so we can kind of whisk it together. Actually, I finally got my salad shaker back from my parents' house. So I can use this to make a little bit of just a really light vinaigrette here. We don't need much. I'm going to do about a tablespoon of olive oil. And a little bit of apple cider vinegar. You can also use white vinegar. Kind of a little less than a tablespoon. We're going to add in just a squeeze of lemon juice. A little bit of garlic salt. About a teaspoon. And a little bit of dill. I'm going to say about a half a teaspoon. I like the dill just to be a little bit of a pop, but not too strong in my salad. And we'll give it a good shake up so that they kind of form together. And then we can drizzle this right over our salad. So we just have this nice kind of cucumber, tomato, and onion salad. Let's season up our veggies here, and then we'll make our tzatziki sauce, and I'll grab the meat out so it has a chance to cool for just a second. And we'll get another naan on. We're gonna put a little bit of garlic salt here to season up the veggies. You want probably about a teaspoon. And then I'm gonna use a little bit of my Greek Freak seasoning. And I always do this towards the end because these are dry spices and I don't have as much oil or liquid in the pan, so I don't want it to stick to my pan and burn. So that way the spices stay on it all towards the end. Okay, we're gonna turn that off. We'll let that sit. Let's get our naan off.
Can you go over the dressing one more time?
Yes. So we did about a tablespoon of olive oil with a little less than a tablespoon of vinegar, about 2 teaspoons of vinegar with probably a teaspoon of fresh lemon juice, half a teaspoon of dill, a teaspoon of garlic salt, and you just kind of shake it up and we'll dress it over it and it will give you just a nice little refreshing kind of tang to your salad. Here we go. Let's get this guy stretched out and cooking, and then we'll add a little bit of butter onto our naan. Here. And then we're going to grab our meat out there because we'll be just about ready to serve up here. Kind of coat it off. This is typically, I always have a little conveyor belt and my kids are just taking the naan as we go. But we've got our meat. We're going to pull it out. Remember, we turned off our temperature so it's stayed nice and warm in here for it. But it should be nice and ready to come out. Whew, steamy.
You got a comment that the dye did come out of the counter?
It did, yes. It comes out. I always say, I was like, I know if I remember the very first time I did it, and when I first got it, I was like, these are supposed to be stainless. And then as soon as I sprayed it down, it completely came off. So I have no fear. I've gotten everything out of here. You know, one of the things I find that always like makes a little stain is vanilla. It always gives me a little brown spot, but it comes out pretty quick. So here is our lamb and pork kind of sheet meat for our hero. We made a lovely panade, and then we seasoned it with Greek Freak, onion powder, garlic, salt, some fresh green onions. We spread it out over our sheet, but you can see our little indentation so that when I grab my spatula to kind of break it up, you'll have almost like little strips of meat that will be perfect for it. Let me grab my yogurt here because we're going to use our yogurt to make the base of our tzatziki sauce. Oh, I'm sorry, Bruni. I didn't see you there. Oh, my dogs love to hang out by my feet and I never see them. A lot of times you won't see it, but she'll be sitting on my feet as I'm cooking because she's like, I rescued her and she is very much like, wherever I am, she follows me. There is no freedom from her. She's always there. Wake up and she's there. Okay, we're going to put in I want to say like a half a cup of yogurt, maybe a little bit more in here. Then we're going to use cucumber. you're going to mince it up so that you have these little teeny tiny cucumber chunks in there. And it's going to just give it such a great kind of refreshing flavor to it. We're also going to add in some green onions and some dill and some lemon juice and garlic salt. But it's just a really fresh, refreshing, and kind of crisp sauce that you can put on your, like, drizzle over your meat, lightens it up a little bit. And I'm using yogurt, but a lot of times I use sour cream. Same thing with my naan. A lot of times I don't have plain yogurt. I always have sour cream. And I find that it is a pretty darn good substitute. So we're going to add in our diced up or minced up cucumbers. And then I don't need a full lemon. So we're going to squeeze, because this was a pretty juicy lemon. We're going to squeeze in about juice from a half a lemon in here. There we go. Let me get my hands a quick little rinse. Okay, let's see if this needs a flipping. Beautiful. You see each one like cooks faster, each one going, because your pan is nice and hot. And I've got some green onions. You can also use red onions, either one. The red onion will give you a slightly sweeter flavor to it, while the green onions hints more at a savory tzatziki sauce, but both work well. So we'll get these kind of sliced up nice and do a couple little chops over here. Pop those in there. And then we're going to use some dill. You want about a teaspoon of dill. So there's a little bit, packs a little bit more of a dill punch. If you have fresh dill, it's even better. But I don't often have fresh dill on me. And then we're going to do a little bit of garlic salt. I want to do about a teaspoon of garlic salt to kind of season it up. I'll give it a good mix, and then I'll see if I need to add anything else to it. But it's just a really light and refreshing sauce. I might add a splash of olive oil as well. So let's grab about, I want to say, a teaspoon of olive oil, and I'm going to do a smidge more garlic salt. Because again, I like my salt. Here. Okay. Beautiful. So here is our beautiful tzatziki sauce. Perfect. Okay. Let's get this guy off, and beautiful. Look how nice and big and fluffy he is.
What yogurt did you use for the naan?
So I use this, it's actually like, I think, an Indian yogurt. Yeah, Indian style yogurt, because the naan is, of course, like an Indian recipe. But really, any full fat kind of plain yogurt, don't use a Greek yogurt. A Greek yogurt's been strained, so it won't have as much liquid into it, and it doesn't give you the right consistency. So let's roll this guy out. I'm going to butter up that naan, and then we'll be ready to plate up. Here. When I'm at my parents' house, I cook the naan out on the their pizza oven outside, and it goes so much faster, but it is wonderful. It gives it a slightly different taste to it, because, you know, it gives you that kind of fire cooked taste, but it's delicious.
It was really going fast when you were cooking at 1,000 degrees.
Yes. So I did not realize. I just kind of made the assumption that the temperature in bold was Fahrenheit, because, you know, I just assumed it. But it's an Italian oven, and it was actually in Celsius. And so I was cooking it very, very high. And I was like, this conducts the heat really well. It cooks it so fast. So I had gotten like really good at cooking it really fast on a high heat, and let alone I'm like cooking it at 1,000 degrees, way hotter than it was supposed to be. And it only took me like a year to realize it. But I always burned the first one. And I was like, until I could get it figured out, I always burned it.
You didn't realize it.
No, I didn't realize it. My husband realized it. Okay, we're kind of cutting through. So just find those nice little lines that you have that I made in there. And this just again makes it a lot easier for these to kind of, lift up on our pan. So you see how they're just going to be wonderful and easy. Okay, let's get a plate here. We're going to get ready to serve up. I'm going to get a little tongs to toss my salad over here. And then we're going to serve up our little kind of refreshing little Greek dinner. So let me toss my salad here real quick. We made that lovely vinaigrette. I poured it over, but I just want to kind of coat everything up first. Okay. Slide a little bit of this mess out of my way. And to grab my naan since it's so beautiful. I made them nice and big today, so they're beautiful. Okay. Grab. Nice. You see how soft and flexible. So we have our homemade naan using our sourdough discard, yogurt, flour. We're going to put on our lamb and pork mixture that we seasoned up with our Greek freak and garlic, salt, and onion powder. So it's kind of seasoned up lovely with those kind of Mediterranean spices. We're going to put our sautéed onions, peppers, and zucchini on it because you've got to have your good little veggie bit for this as I'm flying it around. And then we made our homemade tzatziki sauce using the yogurt, lemon juice, a little bit of dill, garlic, salt, and a splash of olive oil and green onions. Drizzle that over. Let's slide this to the side. And then we have a beautiful and refreshing cucumber and tomato red onion salad that we dressed in a simple lemon, vinegar, olive oil, and dill dressing. But just you'll fold it up and you'll eat it like a champ. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page, search for what we made, our homemade naan and our hero sheet meat, and you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets. I've got my pans, I've got my griddle pan, I've got my fondant roller in there, but I got all of that, all the different cooking gear in my kitchen in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.